Stay tuned to the end of this video for a word to our patrons. Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. Today is a big day, everybody. Mama's home. And if you don't know, this is your first time watching Let's Talk FGO Wanted, we're going to talk about an upcoming or just released servants, history, lore, mechanics, and more. And today is going to be a very highly anticipated episode because after 7 long years, yes, I double-checked how long ago Babylonia was, playable Tiamat, now appearing as a 5-star alter ego, similar to how she appeared in the FGO arcade game. Yes, there was an FGO arcade game. I say was because there's no new content, but I think the machines may still work. But that's, the collab for which this event is going to be based around. Also, hey, if by chance you're seeing this episode and you haven't done FGO's Part 1 story, Observer on Timeless Temple, there's going to be some spoilers. I'm going to experiment with timecodes. Genuinely talking about how not content-brained I am, I literally didn't think about, oh, hey, I can just do timecodes myself because I edit the audio together, so I know what time the stuff is at. Never occurred to me literally until just now, but I'm going to experiment with trying to timecode each segment so that you can jump straight to mechanics or jump around the Fate lore parts that'll be spoilers, etc. But let's get into it. Also, absolutely ad-libbing here, but it's a high pollen count day, and my head is killing me as I record this, so if any parts of the take sound a little weird, just know I'm under duress. And so, starting with history, if somehow you didn't know, Tiamat, which can be transcribed as Tiamat, Tamtum, sometimes even romanized from the Greek as Thalate, with 2 T's at the end there. Anyway, she's a major Mesopotamian goddess, serving as a mother goddess, but also in the role as the god of the primordial chaos, possibly relating to a chaos Kampf myth. Don't worry, we'll come back to that one if you don't know what that means either. The exact etymology of her name isn't clear. It may be linked with the Akkadian word for ocean, which is, at least according to the sources I found on the internet, Tamtu. But that could just be a later copyist conflating her name with the ocean. That would be a spelling or pronunciation I have seen written somewhere more like Tiamtum, which is kind of like a fusion of the 2 ways to transcribe the cuneiform. Some scholars also believe that her name may be linguistically linked with the Semitic word tehom, which refers to the deeps or the abyss of waters in the beginning of the book of Genesis. That could also, again, just be wishful thinking, though. Something you're going to note, I'm ad-libbing again, but something you're going to note from this is the tablets that we have a lot of this story from are really heckin' old, but even they are not the oldest version of this myth, probably. So there's a lot of cases where, because there's so much baggage about the knowledge of how long the myth with Tiamat and the rest of the Mesopotamian era has been around, there's sometimes some wishful thinking involved, I think, in some of the scholarship, and so a lot of this is just it's really old, so we just don't know. Speaking of those tablets, our major source here is going to be the Babylonian epic, the Enuma Elish, also sometimes written Enuma Elis with no H on the end. I'm fairly certain you're supposed to pronounce it Enuma Elish no matter what. Anyway, that's about 1,000 lines recorded on 7 clay tablets, one of which is mostly lost, but the important parts we're working on are the early ones. We can poke fun at the servant Gilgamesh using this as his super attack name, but technically the epic doesn't have a title. We call it the Enuma Elish because that's literally the opening lines of text that translates to when on high. So, it works. Anyway, the Enuma Elish relates to Tiamat as the deity, perhaps the personification of the primordial ocean, at the very least what is described as salt water. And she helps to create the first gods and things in the world with the help of Abzu, also written Apsu, who is the personification of groundwater or fresh water. But I think groundwater in this context works because, we're talking about springs and oases. Anyway, she fills the cosmic abyss with her primeval waters and so on. The salt and the fresh intermix, and that's where the first things are born. Abzu and Tiamat are parents to Lachmu and Lahamu, primordial deities who, in turn, beget Anshar and Kishar, the horizons, the borders of heaven and earth, and then Anu and Ki, the deities of heaven and earth, respectively. And then we get down to having a lot of further generations of gods. Lots of couplets and pairs. These guys, collectively called the Anunnaki, get up to a lot of mythological business which isn't directly related to what we're talking about. Just know that they create multiple generations of new gods, but after about 7 generations, Abzu gets upset at how rowdy everybody is being and threatens to kill them all. So they, in turn, get Enki, who is also known as Ea, who is another water deity and all-around generally important guy, to help them out. In some versions, Enki just figures out Abzu is planning this without necessarily him making overt threats, but he's never considered incorrect for this. Like, he just divines that it's happening. In some versions, even, there's some newer translations and some different versions of the story we found. It suggests that Tiamat actually lets the rest of the Anunnaki know and then, tells Abzu not to do it. Anyway, Enki captures Abzu and uses his power of groundwater to develop irrigation and keep progressing his civilization tech tree, even though humans don't exist yet. He just thought irrigation would be cool. This bothers Kingu, also written Kingu with a Q. I'm not sure if it's actually pronounced different, who is another of Tiamat and Abzu's children. The Enuma Elish doesn't really elaborate. I also have to feel a little bad for Kingu. Like I said, they don't elaborate on his parentage, just that he's supposed to be Tiamat and Abzu's child. And his name apparently literally translates as unskilled laborer. He is truly cast in the role of schmuck. Anyway, Kingu tattles on Enki to Mama, and she is understandably a little nettled. She proclaims Kingu as her new consort and king of the gods. She arms him with the Tablet of Destinies, a set of clay tablets and seals which basically, in the shortest version, gives its holder the legal right to change fate, declares them as the king of the gods, and also says they have the power to alter destiny, and so on. And then she gives birth to 11 tribes or kinds of monsters to battle the other gods. These are Bashmu, the venomous snake, who's supposed to be a snake with arms and wings, associated with the same constellation the Greeks would call Hydra. Ushumgalu, the great dragon, said to be a cross between a horned serpent and a lion. Mushmahu, the exalted serpent, a snake with 7 mouths. Mushkashishu, the fierce snake, a lot of snakes, another eagle snake dragon guy. Laumu, the hairy one, who is probably different from the god, they just have the same meaning of name. Ugalu, the storm beast, another lion-headed dragon thing, usually. Uridimu, the rabbit hound. Getabliu, there's 2 L's in there. The scorpion man. Umadarutu, the violent storms. Kulululu, the fish man. And Kusariku, the bull man. So, lots of classic mythological entities. At this exact moment, Enki decides to take a nap. So it's up to Anu, the king of heaven, to hold off Tiamat. He does this for a while, but he gets tired too, so we run through Enlil and then eventually into Marduk, son of Enki. There has been some interpretation, because of what Marduk ends up doing in the end of this story, that this was like an archetypal myth that they may have just slotted in whoever the founder god for the local city was. We specifically found these tablets in Babylonia, so it's Marduk. But I've also read that there's some, contention about that. It may be that just the version that got passed around is the one where Marduk wins because that was the most popular culture. But like I said, there's room for mad-libbing this story a little. Anyway, Marduk defeats Kingu and Tiamat using a wide variety of tools. He then uses Tiamat's body to basically form what the Mesopotamians thought of as the universe. Her ribs become the vaults of heaven and earth. Her tail becomes the Milky Way. Her tears become the source of the 2 rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. This is why, by the way, because of the 2 rivers, it's called Mesopotamia, meaning between 2 rivers. Kingu's blood is mixed with clay to make the first humans, and so on and so forth. So, we've kind of formed everything here. Marduk also gets to keep the Tablets of Destiny and becomes the new king in heaven. He creates the city of Babylonia, and so, as I said, our mythic cycle continues. He keeps working on new fun things. Now, as I mentioned before, this myth is often considered a Chaos Kampf, a battle against chaos, which is a format seen in a decent number of Indo-European mythologies. A culture hero god battles a cosmic entity who represents chaos. A lot of these formats involve a storm god, and then the entity they battle is a primordial serpent or dragon, though you could also argue that killing Ymir, described anyway, as an ice giant to make, the realms is another Chaos Kampf type thing. But the Enuma Elish doesn't exactly fit that format. It's usually still considered a Chaos Kampf, but there is a little bit of, tighter definitions where it may not match. There was a primordial chaos before Abzu and Tiamat, and in the primordial chaos, Tiamat did do some roaring and smiting, allegedly. But arguably things were fairly peaceable until the conflict with the younger deities. This might be a better example of a myth called the Theomachy, a war between deities. This is another one, a format you're probably pretty familiar with. If I said Titanomachy instead of Theomachy, for instance. Now, the desire to fit this as a chaos conf may be why Tiamat is often described as a sea serpent or dragon. This is not exactly how she is depicted in the tablets. At times, she's just referred to as a woman. Though, again, admittedly, we're hammering down cuneiform on clay tablets, so there may have been some abridging. But, she's got a mix of anthropomorphic and bestial features. Normal things you'd expect on any living creature, like a skull, ribs, heart, blood, that sort of stuff. But also, described as having a breast or a chest, thighs kind of a thing. But definitely also, as I mentioned before, has a tail. So, something there. But there were no little pictures on the original tablets of the Enema Elish we found. That said, there is apparently a depiction of her in Palmyra, which shows her structure mostly as a woman, but with snakes for legs. I do want to say, I think we can be forgiven, or scholars anyway, can be forgiven for assuming Tiamat must be somewhat draconic herself, considering out of the 11 beast types she births, 5 of them are serpents or dragons. And I know for 11 that's not a majority, but, you've got some guys who are just, Fishman, Bullman, Hairy Guy, and then there's, like I said, 5 different serpents or dragons. There is also a famous engraving in the ancient city of Nineveh, which I am probably using as the bed image for this segment, which shows a figure with thunderbolts fighting a griffin-like creature. This is usually interpreted as Marduk and Tiamat, because Marduk is supposed to have, arrows of winds or storms he uses. But it could be other figures, and that exact bas-relief is not, labeled. It's not clearly labeled, here is Marduk and Tiamat. It can be interpreted that way, but like I said, there's also some room there. So, like I said, this is one that threw me for a loop, because you see that image everywhere if you start searching for Tiamat, because like I said, there aren't a lot of, depictions of her physically in Mesopotamia that I could see anyway, so a lot of people just assume that one because, we need an image. Many humans are visual learners. But I was very confused because I'm like, okay, but how do we know this is Tiamat? We don't. We just think it might be. In a factor that will come up later, Tiamat may be linked to another Mesopotamian goddess, Namu. Namu is a creator goddess from Eriadu, who is a protector and sometimes associated with water, including possibly the sea, though maybe not. She's usually depicted as the mother of Enki, also sometimes the mother of heaven and earth, and sometimes there are some texts that connect her to Abzu, but also a lot of the time she is more of a soul creator deity. It is probably not the case that Namu and Tiamat are the exact same goddess, but rather different local versions of the mythology went from a version where we had one single, protective creator deity of the waters to a salt and freshwater duology later. So there's some room for interpolation there, but it is not an exact case where I think those are, the exact same, just with different names. It's more of a, drift over time. And obviously Tiamat is pretty popular in pop culture. The one you probably most know about if you're listening to this video on the internet is the evil dragon goddess Tiamat from Dungeons & Dragons. Goes all the way back to the first edition of Greyhawk in 1975, where there was an evil dragon queen, detailed eventually in 1977's Monster Manual, the original. Tiamat is considered the mother of all chromatic dragons, the ones which are the evil. She's also, in the original lore, considered the ruler of Avernus, which is the first of the 9 hells, so she is also a, as I said, demonic dragon. And most of her later lore is some variation on that, though occasionally D&D goes a little harder on the Babylonian input than not. Anyway, the D&D Tiamat is usually depicted as a 5-headed dragon, with each head having a different color for one of the classical chromatic dragons, black, blue, green, red, and white, and each of them have the respective powers of that species of dragons. She is rival with Bahamut, the deity of all the good dragons, who are the metallic ones. This multi-headed Tiamat is also probably the inception for Tiamat as a recurring boss in the Final Fantasy series. Usually she's not multicolored, but multi-headed in that. The 14 one's actually a little bit of a break from that. Okay, time for the big spoiler zone. Buckle up, kids. Now, I will say, compared to, say, D&D, Fate has a pretty restrained view of Tiamat. She is a demonic beast of extraordinary size. She does have the dragon trait. Her features are still mostly humanoid with some extra dragon-y bits. Even when she goes kaiju mode in the story, she is mostly human-shaped until the climax, when they actually phrase it as her draconic body. Even that body is still, artistically recognizable as being Tiamat adjacent. But yes, the Tiamat we meet is indeed the goddess of creation, originally titled Namu, a mother goddess, a protective goddess, one who presides over the primordial waters. I'll leave the flub in. Fuck it. And those primordial waters, though, are her sea of life, giving rise to all living things. In the context of the Mesopotamian gods, she is considered the origin of all living things. As I said, not unlike how life originally came from the oceans. insert a quote from the History of Everything, I guess, here. But yes, she gave rise to them by virtue of existing, but after being defeated by Marduk, she was sealed in the reverse side of the world in the imaginary space where her authority is no longer needed. So not quite killed, but, her authority is no longer used, and what's left of her, physical form is banished to the reverse side as the laws of the cosmos start to make more sense from a scientific standpoint. But this does allow Tiamat to reemerge in Singularity number 7, Babylonia, when that guy, Gatia, used the power of a Holy Grail to reawaken her. First, she acts through Gorgon as a proxy, but then reveals what is called her femme fatale form, which is her small mode, in Babylonia anyway, who's still like 7 feet tall, I think. She's very tall. Anyway, that is a restrained version of her form. After that gets destroyed, her corpus gets unleashed, and then she goes kaiju mode. Basically, while she has a desire to both revenge herself on gods and man, she is also still their mother figure, so she has an instinctive desire to create a new ecosystem. In her small form, she's holding back. When it's destroyed, her true kaiju powers are unleashed so that she can be real aggro and really fuck some shit up. We find out from here that Tiamat is classified as Beast 2, an evil of humanity. Hopefully you are following along well enough with the beasts. If you're watching this video, you're hopefully semi-caught up on some FGO stuff. I even had a spoiler warning earlier. But the short version is the beasts are the 7, ? Manifestations of the karma of human progress. They're born from a love of humanity, but also the conditions in which we naturally move on and progress as a species. Part of our natural process of evolution, the evils we are inseparable from. Each beast has a logos, a core logic to its manifestation. Tiamat as Beast 2 represents the sin of regression, the state of wishing to return to an earlier period. In Tiamat specifically, she is a manifestation of her desire to return humanity and all life on Earth to a state where they are dependent on Mother's love. Because otherwise we'd all grown past that. As a beast class entity, Tiamat originally has an immensely powerful saint graph, well in excess of 7 regular servants, and in totality stronger even than an individual grand servant. Her powers allow her to manifest untold amounts of magical energy. There are big numbers that are related to this, but they're like DBZ power levels. I don't know what they mean. Number big, man. Anyway, this allows her to maintain her Titan body despite the fact that even by the era of the Babylonia depicted in the Singularity, she shouldn't be able to stand, let alone walk on the Earth's surface. Square cube law type stuff. Even that should be beyond the Babylonians' understanding of the world, their version of mystery. But she has a shitload of magic energy, so she can do it. Her strongest form, her dragon corpus, is produced by regressing her saint graph back to the time period of the Jurassic Age, when life was manifested very differently, and there was a lot more mystery going on. This is her physically largest scale and also her biggest magical power output. Now, Tiamat is Beast number 2, because she manifested her crown, her authority of the beast, after Beast number 1, Gatia. If one evil of humanity manifests, it is guaranteed to cause a cascading effect, which means that we will eventually result in Beast 7 appearing. It's not explicitly stated, it's definitely not stated they have to appear in order, but it's also not explicitly stated that the higher number beasts are stronger. It's just that they will appear and we will overcome them. But Tiamat, who is 2, is supposed to be having more raw power than Gatia, the King of Mages, though allegedly his bands of light would be capable of destroying her body, which you can't normally do, because, she's got so much life juice. Tiamat's particular authority of the beast manifests as her Negagenesis skill, a conceptual bounded field, like a reality marble, which rejects the proper course of human history, basically her will to be nuh-uh, didn't happen. This grants her protection against any noble phantasm from a servant of human order, specifically those who are human and star attribute. If you're heaven or earth, there's some wiggle room in there. And gives her the ability to generate the space where she could perform the second Genesis, outright rejecting servants. In general, she has a strong ability and affinity against anything which comes from a mother's womb, which in Fate is not a universal quality. There are several servants which would not count. But Tiamat also manifests her Sea of Life, a black mud filled with the true ether of the Age of Gods. This lets her perform her own self-modification at a rank of EX, lets her spawn nearly infinite magical beasts of those 11 types we talked about, lets her perfectly and physically subsume and take over other servants, reprogramming them to function on her end. It is conceptually similar, but not actually the same as the Grail Mud made by Angramanyu. But it is noted in the notes, the design notes, that Dark Sakura was one of the inspirations for the designs of Tiamat. Now, Tiamat is the climactic boss of Singularity 7. to kind of talk about how big her power scale is. We got to jump through all kinds of hoops to defeat her, negate her Sea of Life, dump her in the underworld, give her a concept of death. So her beast-like powers of paradox, aggression, and self-manifestation are turned off, and then hit her with everything we got. But I say all that because, even then, you can't get away from your mother that easily. In a different parallel world, the arcade game timeline, Tiamat realizes that the humanity who defeated, aka overcame her, are at risk of being wiped out by a calamity from the sea. So basically, Tiamat uses her pre-established self-modification and self-seal powers to create a juvenile clone of herself, has all of her memories, but her abilities are restrained into the scale of a normal saint graph, and she sends her to Chaldea to help us with the upcoming Lilum Harlot event. The Tiamat who manifests in Arcade also did something similar, so we're just doing that now. This form is categorized as Tiamat Larva, or Larva Tiamat, not unlike a certain character in Extella Link. She is an alter ego who manifests as the daughter of creation, not the mother of creation, though she can still get, I think, about as big as her femme fatale form in 3rd Ascension. Gaetia, by the way, came up with that name, and he called her a woman of destiny. Thanks, St. Graph Ascension. But basically, she has all the same powers of Tiamat. She has her memories of being defeated in Babylonia, but her ranks in a lot of skills and powers are lower because she doesn't have access to her Jurassic-era mana reactor. So she's going to be a big deal in the upcoming Lilum Harlot event. Tiamat's also always been suggested by existing in the game, though. King Protea was cut from the original version of Extra CCC, and obviously, though that happens after Tiamat appears, she's referenced in the playable version of KP in FGO. But Tiamat is one of the, mother goddesses and earth goddesses suggested with the powers of creation known as Pontia Theron, who are shown off in, King Protea's design philosophy. Okay, so, mechanics. Sorry, if you did or did not do the timecode jump, I'm trying to give myself some space from the spoilers. But also, I wrote that line after I'd legitimately been working for 2 hours to write the previous sections of the script alone. Obviously, when I wrote this part, I didn't know how long it was. But I can tell you, and you can see from the video, that I do know that now it's 20 minutes long. So, hey, how you doing? Anyway, Tiamat is an alter ego with, shocking I know, lower attack, higher HP. She's tied for HP with Rasputin, and not quite reaching the austere HP levels of Kiara. She does have a quick arts buster deck with, average to above average hits, but slightly below average NP gain at 0.44. Not a huge problem, but keep that one in mind. You'll see why later. Now, her Noble Phantasm, her NP, is very simple. It's going to be AoE Buster, hits all enemies. She removes her own debuffs first, and after hitting, gives all enemies Skill Seal for 1 turn. Her Overcharge effect is Buster Up for 3 turns, which procs first. And her skill number 1 is an immensely powerful lockdown skill. It, first of all, is still her 30 to 50% battery, but also slams all enemies with a 100% critical chance down and a straight-up heal block effect for 1 turn. While there are some abilities to reduce enemies' heal rate, I do believe this is the first instance where there's straight-up a negation of enemies' abilities to heal, period. Not even percentage-wise, just straight-up, you can't heal on a playable unit. Her second skill manifests as a 3-turn of both 20 to 30% attack and Buster Up. It also gives all enemies a 60% chance to stun them, and slaps them with a 1k to 2k curse for 3 turns. So a little bit of a dot, a little bit of a stun chance, and is also her primary damage steroid whenever you want to get in there and start slapping. But wait, there's more. Mother packed you lunch. And by lunch, I mean she has a team-wide heal, which is 500 to 1500 HP. It is a team-wide 10% battery, and it also gives the whole squad 10 to 20% NP damage for 1 turn. This skill's minimum cooldown is 2 turns. You heard me right. It starts at 4. Crazy talk. Now, being a, former beast candidate, whatever you want to call it, alter ego of a beast, she has a bucket of passives as most beasts do. She's got a flat 10% crit up at all times. Her independent manifestation gives her a further 4% crit and also 4% specific resistance to instant death and mental debuffs. She has a passive version of self-modification EX, which means she has a damage cut of 500 at all times, so her large HP value goes even further. And also, she still has Goddess Essence EX, so she has a damage plus, and also still just has a 30% debuff resistance, period. Phenomenal debuff resistance. Oh yeah, and she also has a passive where she generates 5% NP per turn, so that 0.44%, meaningless. She generates 5% NP every turn. Crazy good stuff. So, obviously, Tiamat should be pretty good in her context, which is primarily going to be a sweeper for farming or any other ad-based waves. She's got a Buster NP for higher damage output. She has solid self-steroids. She can give herself, the Buster Up first with NP and also has a steroid skill for it. And also she has a 50% battery skill, so you should be able to reloading. Alter Egos already have positive class advantage against multiple servant classes, all the cavalry classes, and also some other fun classes. So that gives her a perfectly fine sweep. But also, in addition to just having a perfectly serviceable kit for an alter ego farmer, she's got some of the nastiest crowd control tech we've seen since Yuoga's guest appearance. A 1 turn of just 0 crit chance and no healing. Another skill gives her a 60% chance to stun. And also, honestly, as enemies get more annoying, the skill seal on her NP can actually be helpful. This has previously been a topic for debate if you haven't been following Fate Grand Order for a very long time, but back in the old days, for probably, I want to say, at least the first couple of years, and perhaps longer, skill seal was seen as bad, usually, because generally enemy skills were usually not punishing enough that they mattered, but if you skill sealed them, they would just attack. There were certain contexts where it was good, but niche stuff like buff block was a little better in that case, usually. Now, I think as time has gone on, generally wanting your opponent to just attack normally and not do some really annoying skills that they can repeat, because, God, back in the day, there were some loopable skills that are really annoying. Enemies don't have, skill cooldowns normally. It is, a perfectly valid strategy to just be also, skill seal, don't do something really annoying. And on top of that, a hat on a hat. Every few turns, she can give the whole gang 1,500 health and 10% NP. That's nuts. I know it's only 10%, but still. First of all, that means she's getting, 15 every turn minimum because of her passives, but also, like I said, team-wide heals and NP. So, who we hanging with? Who we doing our team comp with? Well, obviously, I think Tiamat is great for the Koyan of Light Buster Reload type strats. Koyan supplies her with all the tools she needs to keep slamming her NP. She's got a 50% battery with a 6-turn cooldown. You combine that with the fact that you've got 2 fitties if you double Koyan, and also you can use the cooldown reduction on a Mystic Code. You should be able to reload. But also, because it's a minimum 2-turn cooldown on her 3rd skill, Innovator Bunny from Koyan literally means Tiamat can fire her 3rd skill multiple times in the same turn. If you give her cooldown reduction of 2, she can immediately fire the skill again, which is another 10% NP gain, another, 1,500 heal, and so on and so forth. Plus, those NP damage ups will stack. That should be sufficient for most forms of farming. If you want to get jiggy with it and stack even more damage, Tiamat is still Chaotic Evil, so she benefits from Ashia Doman's stuff. She also does have a curse. She is both a animal trait servant and a non-hominid for Koyan of Dark. And if you do want to send her damage into the stratosphere, you could consider Oberon for a final wave, if you need that for some of that 90++ shit. And you can even use older Buster supports as well. Because of some of the other nonsense you can do, a single Merlin, even though he only usually has 20% NP charge up, you can make that work with the right massaging of your craft essences, other supports and stuff to give her even more HP and add a little extra crit effect on there as well. She already has very good passive crit damage, but with some other modifiers, a NPBB turn to blow up the ads and then beat the shit out of a high HP enemy are perfectly valid. For craft essences, well, Tiamat has a 50% battery, so you can go that route to enable a instant firing of her NP initially. I would say in general, she does pretty good with Buster, NP, and attack up. She does have some crit potential herself, so you could go for craft essences that increase that, or maybe give her some extra star weight. But yeah, and she has arts cards, obviously, so she can work with servants and craft essences that are blue-red comboed. But you should still be able to work very well to punch through quite a few things with just some very basic, attack up, Buster up, NP up, whatever. And if you want to go crazy, you can try a Black Grail or something and just, double Koyan cooldown reduction your way through everything. But I think it's better if you have some starting NP. Also, while it is a little more expensive to run, very fun fact, her append skill that gives her anti-class damage, it's very rare for her. She has the anti-beast one, so have fun with that. Can be very useful for a lot of things. And now for my famed other stuff. Keeping track of materials, Ascension's pretty easy. She's an alter ego, so she just needs a mix of regular Rider and Lancer statues. Should not be too hard to run through. Normal skills follow a similar format, though she will need 9 Comet Shards by the end. But for such high-value skills, they should be pretty easily affordable. She literally only uses gold mats, which means lower amounts. No bronze or silvers to fight through. Her append skills will require some newer stuff, but that's because that is supposed to be a quote-unquote newer system. Now, I'm going to warn you, Tiamat is not a super common servant when it comes to banner rarity. She's going to appear in the pre-release campaign for Lilith Harlot, which is supposed to be the arcade collab, and its rerun. The rerun was voted on by the players in JP, but we'll probably get that over here in order to keep the parity of the banners, or also, honestly, not just for Tiamat, but also for Draco, who is also a rare servant. I suspect that if polled, the people on the English server would pick the same event anyway. She's going to have a New Year's banner. That's going to be New Year's 2026, so end of this year, and also a weekly alter ego banner that just hit in JP. They ran through a weekly campaign of all the alter egos. And unlike Draco, Tiamat is a valid candidate for all Lucky Bag GSSR summons, so there are many of opportunities there to go through the GSSR system. And that's it for the other stuff. Hopefully we get this one out in a timely manner. So that means time for normal outro shit. If you're watching this on YouTube and you've watched all of it, please fire us up a like. It's very helpful. Spread the word. Share it with your friends even. Leave a comment down below on how well you're doing on the banners and so forth and so on. You can also join our Discord for more conversations, including a roll thread. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel to get more wanted videos because, hey, guess what? There'll be another one of these coming up pretty soon. And also, we do have a podcast called Let's Talk FGO, Let's Talk Fate Grand Order. We do mostly every week. We've had some illnesses and technicals in our past, March month, so it's been a little rough. But there should be what I call a pre-game segment, a summary and guide to the event, Lilith Harlot, that is about to progress. And also we talk about other Fate news and other fun stuff going on in the world. So check that out. And make sure you've rung the bell so you always know when we're posting new videos or streaming. I don't actually want to know when this one's going to go live to public, so I won't advertise any particular streams, but check out our channel. We've got some streams. Because, in addition to being able to support us by joining our channel memberships to get access to badges and emotes, good for comments and streams, you can also support us on Patreon. Could have gotten this video early. For our 5 and up patrons, you can listen to the podcast get recorded live at our higher tiers, and you can get an on-air shout-out at our highest tier, which I will do in a second. But, like I said, this episode was brought to you by our patrons, including our specialist patrons, Adam DeHarp, Black the Stogie, Call Me Zed, Carlos Dragon, JDV9000, Chris Starlight, Legendary Boss Hunter, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Robin, Sharvor, some guy named Bob, and Varen the Crow. Give it your support, everybody. Like we do, consider supporting us on Patreon. Thanks.